So I'm going to talk a little bit about live action storytelling. If everyone hasn't been taking notes so far, you're all remiss because those last two people said amazing things. And I was very impressed with all their great ideas, so you guys should be writing things down. That's my thoughts. OK, next. So this is kind of what this talk is going to be about. We're going to talk about sort of early ideas in VR versus maybe more VR-specific development ideas. We're going to talk about the human camera, as was already referenced. We're going to talk about losing the frame, which people are upset about, changing perspectives, which could be an opportunity in VR. And then we're going to talk a little bit nuts and bolts on the filmmaking side. So, and who knows, one day we'll all make money, I guess. My background, I have made some VR films that did very well. I shot Clouds Over Sidra for the UN and Verse. I shot other things all over the world with them, with the UN. And then when I got back from Clouds Over Sidra's shoot, I was at Discovery, and I was like, guys, stop the presses. We're not making any more YouTube videos. We need to just make VR, obviously, because we could take people places and teach them things. And so we did some pretty cool stuff with Discovery VR. We did an animated piece where you're inside the human body, and that human body's on a date. So your stomach's gurgling, and your heart's racing, and you look through the eyes, and it's live action, but it's upside down. We talked about that. So, but we also, now I left Discovery, and now I started my own company. It's called Variable Labs. We work at Google, and still the UN, and X Prize, and a bunch of others. So I'll move on. Not too long ago when TV started coming around, the story development that was going on, if you look on your left, it was kind of that, oh, we're making a radio show, and we now have a camera involved. Okay, so it took a little while to get to this next phase where we weren't making radio shows on television, and we were making these two-shot interviews, and we realized this new language, this new growing language of television making, which could apply to cinema and everything else, right? So. In VR, if you'll notice, that's a VR rig in the middle of the shot. You'll see that they kind of were like, what would it be like to be at a concert that was being filmed by a bunch of filmmakers? It's probably pretty boring on the back half, right? So this is sort of that one camera approach where maybe the plot of this movie is not about the people making the film, and it turns out they're getting half the real estate in our movie. Right? We should be thinking about ideas that require 360, that require that hurdle of putting on a headset or holding up your phone instead of looking down or moving around in space or looking goofy. So you have to sort of overcome that hurdle, and you do that through development of stories that are more apt for this sort of environment and better express themselves through this environment. So at Discovery, we had some cool ideas. We wanted to get inside the shoes of people with neurological disorders. So the task was, I need you to make science VR. That comes down from the top. OK, science VR. You could put Diet Coke and Mentos in a circle, and you could do that. That's sort of the circle approach. That seemed a little bit like putting radio show on television. So instead, we wanted to get inside the shoes of other people. We realized this is an empathy machine. And so all of a sudden, now you have synesthesia. You can hear in colors. We also did a surf school with this sort of big wave pro surfer in the area. And he takes you on the same wave over and over and over, and you look in different directions. And all of a sudden, it's all about where you are in the swell, your spatial orientation. Right? That's a very hard to learn thing when you're not on the board itself, when you're just on the beach. Right? They teach you how to pop up, but they don't teach you about spatial awareness until you're out in the water. And it's something you can learn in VR. Moving on. Now, this is recently Steven Spielberg said this crazy thing, which is so sad. I agree with Maureen, by the way, for anyone who's counting. So Steven Spielberg is very afraid that the directors are no longer going to have all the power in a movie, and now it's the audience that has the power. And that seems so strange because a beautiful one take that Facebook made recently, I don't know if anyone's seen this, but it's really amazing. I'm not actually into one take VR movies, but this one's great, and it's called Grand Central Station. It might have a different title, but it's about Grand Central Station. And it's kind of a ballet. It's amazing how people have these moments next to the camera, and they're so oblivious to the camera, and it just works so well. And it really didn't make me think the filmmakers weren't thinking about the full frame, this new frame, the spherical frame. Jessica Brillhart, one of probably the most articulate and great minds of VR today, is a principal filmmaker at Google for VR. She has a great Medium blog post, which everyone, if you're interested in VR storytelling, you should start reading immediately. But she says some great things, including this, which is that this camera is a human head, right? So at Discovery, everyone wanted to put that camera on the edge of a shovel, some big dig rig, and there's your camera, and it's in a cool place, or it's flying above, all these things that are going on, or it's down on the edge of the skateboard. Well, those are all terrible places to put someone's head, right? No one wants to put their head next to a shovel or on the front of a skateboard. This is like awful. I mean, you're going to give people PTSD. So it was the ideas these people had. So it's great to experiment. Everyone should experiment. But I think the lessons we learned very quickly were this camera, you should treat it like it's a human head because that's what your audience is experiencing. Your audience is that camera in the room. I'll move on. So one thing we get to do, which is pretty cool, is work with the UN making VR. And the UN, instead of sort of that bottom-up approach to impact, instead of, I need 1 million views, and we're going to get 100,000 petitions, signatures, and we're going to sort of pressure from the bottom up, the UN has this unique opportunity, right? So we showed, My Mother's Wing was our most recent release from the UN VR team, and we went to Gaza and filmed this piece about sort of humanizing people that live in Gaza. And you spend time with this mother of children, and she has lost children in shellings, but she has children still left, and she has to survive and carry on. And it's kind of just about a human that's living in a war zone. And so all of a sudden, they get to show it at the Security Council. They're talking about the rights of those that are without rights sometimes. And here we are fostering empathy with those people. So similarly, Ban Ki-moon watching Clouds Over Sidro, it's raised billions of extra dollars. UNICEF translated it into 6 languages. It's in 40 countries against all those languages. They cut it down from 8 minutes to 4 minutes, and they do it with street teams, the kids with clipboards. And they've had double. So instead of 1 out of every 12 people give them money, 1 out of every 6 people give them money if they have a little Google Cardboard and that one video. And it just took a 4-minute video. That moved the needle in such a drastic way that it's really changing the culture on donations. And if anyone's in that space of like VR for impact, I'm interested in that and happy to talk about it. I'll move on. So this is a behind the scenes of our filming in Gaza. It's only 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and I think it'll be enlightening. So that was kind of heavy. We're going to move on to something less heavy. So now we're going to talk a little nuts and bolts. Monoscopic, stereoscopic, binaural audio. I think I've tried to make it as clear as possible. So monoscopic, right, one eyeball. It's sort of the magic phone mode is what people are calling it. Facebook, it says tilt and rotate on the bottom corner. But that's that. It's single lens in every direction. There's stereoscopic, which gives you 2 eyeballs in every direction, like the Ozo. And binaural audio, which it's actually the focal point of this photo is that little teeny sprout of microphones at the very top, which just gives you sort of that directional audio. Currently, though, we have a problem of not being able to play back directional audio exactly. We kind of live in a 5.1 world. So, as far as live action recording of sounds, the way I've found, the way I found it to work best is we set out zoom, like sort of H4Ns all around the room, and then we pair those. We can like mix them to 5.1, and that gives you that sort of surround sound. That's sort of the cheap and easy way. You could also get a $60,000 Ozo. So post-production for VR. This is the, okay, so there's kind of 2 ways to get to VR. One is sort of an animation route, more on the gaming side and like sort of build things from the ground up. And one is, more on like the, I was into Final Cut 7 route. So the Final Cut 7ers in the room, those people are mostly using this sort of product suite called Color. It was bought by GoPro. They let you do quick stitches, which sort of has an automatic function, lines up all your clips, all the cameras you had, and then finds a horizon line and kind of levels it out. And it's a little dirty and there's missing pieces, but it lets you edit once you get to that spot. You have a globe of each shot, and you can wrap it, turn it back into like a map, right? So you start out with a sphere, cut it, and then turn it into a map. And you'll see once you bring it into Premiere, you get that the image on the left is the right edge of the frame and the left edge of the frame. They touch each other, and the top touches each other at all sides. The bottom touches each other at all sides too. So that would be how it looks in Premiere. It gets like flattened like a map. And now there's sort of new plugins coming up every day, but Skybox is a popular one, which is sort of a VR plugin for Premiere, $200 here and there. Lets you do all sorts of stuff with titles that make all the graphics and stuff like sort of distort in the correct way, because when you're editing in this environment, it's like built for rectangles, but you gotta like put it onto a sphere. So, and if anyone wants to talk about that, happy to talk about that more. I'll move on. So just, this is second to last slide. This is kind of a way of thinking about storyboarding. Maureen mentioned it earlier, and I would love to try their storyboarding techniques. But this is another thing that Jessica Brilhart talks a lot about, which is, they used to think about editing like a square and a square and a square next to each other, because the transitions are kind of crossfades and dips to black. And you could think about VR that way too. You could think about cinematic or live action VR that way, sphere, sphere, sphere. And I often thought, oh, why wouldn't you think of it that way? But actually, if you look on the bottom left image, that spherical media on the left side, imagine the black dots are the primary focus and the white dots are your secondary focus. Now this just lets us visualize where you want the audience's attention to be. It's not, and so those concentric circles they function the same as that line of rectangles, or could be a line of spheres. And you could put a line of spheres with a primary, with like this here, scene, scene, and scene. You could put line up. And so these are all new ways of drawing what we're trying, drawing the vision to explain it to others, right? And in Baobab's case, animators. In my case, editors. So that's pretty much it. This is the last thing I'll talk about, just because it's just came out and it's awesome, and everyone should just see it if you're interested in VR, because I think it's like a cool experiment. It's not in live action. Jump cuts in VR, I have found, have never really been too, they don't work well. They tend to be jarring, people get weirded out by it, and you feel like abrupt in all moments. And so this is a whole movie of jump cuts. And I was just so into it. I couldn't believe it. So there's kind of this concept in gaming, I think, where, and I'm not a gamer, so please keep me honest, but there's a concept where they talk about having a nose. If you can see your nose in every moment, then you don't get so nauseous. If you guys have ever played Hover Junkers, there's another example of, so you're kind of in that ship. And even though, anybody Hover Junkers players? We can play it, we'll be later. It's an online Vive game, you guys should all get into it. Anyway, they have the same thing where that having the walls of the ship you're going around on makes you not get disoriented. It makes you not get nauseous because it's steady every time there's like that static frame. And so even though you can move and you can look and you can drive all at the same time, it somehow doesn't make you nauseous. And so that is something, there's something about the jump cuts in this car, and it's just steady all the time. North in the car is north forever, the whole movie long. And you're just a passenger in that car. And I didn't think jump cuts could work, but I was proven wrong by Google. So, as usual. Anyway, that's my talk, and you can find me on the internet.